One bite, one secret, one murder buried in the brine. Welcome to Wolfe Mysteries. I'm your host, eager to know where you're tuning in from. Drop it in the comments. I love seeing it. Thanks for joining this journey. Let's crack the case. The brownstone runs on rhythms as unyielding as the pyramids, and Nero Wolfe's routine is about as welcoming to surprises. When the doorbell rang at 11:14 a.m. on a Thursday 2 minutes before Fritz was due with Wolfe's beer in 3 minutes, before I was set to head downtown for a client meeting, I knew the day was already derailed. I was halfway to the door when Wolfe's voice, a warm cement wall, rumbled from the dining room. Archie, unless it's a delivery of goods or documents, dispose of it. That was his polite way of saying he didn't want company standard fare. Wolfe views sharing air with uninvited guests as a diplomatic felony. Still, curiosity tugged me forward. Cats. You know, I opened the door to a man who looked like sleep had ghosted him since Eisenhower's day. Then, 50-ish, he wore a jacket that once knew a tailor, but now clung to hope by a thread. His face was pale, not anemia, but whiskey's kind of pale-nant when he smiled. It stopped short of his teeth. You, Archie Goodwin, Hyons, voiced like gravel underfoot. You've nailed it, I said, eyeing him. He extended a hand. I took it, cold, damp, and oddly firm. A great combo. My name's Felix Clant. I need to speak with Nero. It's important congregational. So do half the crazies in Manhattan. What's your topic? Business, pleasure, or criminal regret? That got Ablink. He stepped closer, a touch desperate. It's personal. And if I could just have 10 minutes, I think he'll want to hear what I have to say. It concerns an olive pit. Yeah, that stopped me to not a gun, not a will, not a dying confession, an olive pit. I was about to make a joke when I saw something, just a flicker. In his eyes, fear or guilt or something close enough that I figured it might get Wolfe's nose twitching. Wait here, sad. And left thing on the stoop. Wolfe was in the dining room, folding his napkin with ecclesiastical precision. The beer wasn't touched. He says his name is Felix Clant, and he wants to talk to you about an olive pit. Wolfe didn't move if I send him away. He's either a lunatic or onto something. He looks like he hasn't slept hand. I think he's about to crack the word olive pit made his. I twitch. Wolfe glared at me, then closed his eyes. Is he clean, immaculate, in the wrong way expensive? His clothes worn too long, either a man with a secret or a man just lost his income. That did. Wolfe heaved the kind of sigh that indicated I'd won around. He hadn't admitted to playing 10 minutes no more. I brought his clan in and jested him into the office. Wolfe hadn't risen, of course. He was in his chair, bulbous and brooding, dressed like Thorold, owed him peace and silence. Cortland didn't flinch at the setup, which told me he'd either read up or didn't care. My name is Felix Cortland. He began. I was, until last week, a senior advisor to Norva, import specialty food distributors. Wolfe opened his eyes. Italian olives, Greek oils, Spanish anchovies. I am familiar. We also handle certain exclusives, private label exports. Last month, a shipment came in with a defect. I noticed it, brought it up. Then, I was asked firmly to take an unscheduled leave. Wolfe waved a hand. I am not a labor lawyer. No, but someone is going to die, or already has. I think I've found something. I think he stopped, rubbed his forehead. You won't believe, maybe you. Someone left a message in a jar, a confession. Hidden inside an olive. That was when Wolfe leaned forward. Not much, but enough for me to notice, which meant Cortland wasn't full of it, or at least was full of the right flavor of it. I brought it with me, Cortland said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a slim envelope. Inside was a small, clear plastic bag. Inside that an olive pit split neatly in half. Someone had hollowed it, sealed it, and then cracked it open. Wolfe took it silently, examined it with The narrowed eyes then looked at Cortland. What did it say? Cortland swallowed it, said forgive. He didn't deserve it. It wasn't an accident. A silence settled, not the usual Wolfe silence, which is companionable in a chilly way. This was a holding pattern. Finally, Wolfe said, "Why come to me?" Cortland looked straight at him. "Because I think the person who wrote that message is in danger. Or didn't, I think. Whoever buried it inside the olive didn't know it would reach me. I was never supposed to open the jar. It was a mistake." Wolfe nodded. Most imperceptibly, Archie cancel your meeting. Thought you might say that he turned back. To Cortland, "I will give Yaya 10 minutes then." "Mr. Cortland, if your story is not an elaborate fiction or asymptom, I will tell you what I will do." And just like that, the sanctity of Thebron stone cracked. There are few things Nero Wolfe detests more than having his sanctuary polluted by uninvited funnemen, second only perhaps to insufficient butterfat content in cheese. But as Felix Cortland, percudoniasly, in the red chair with that split olive pit resting like a cursed relic on Wolfe's desk, I could already tell we were headed for a disturbance of the first order. Wolfe tapped the pit once lightly with his index finger, then withdrew his hand as if the thing carried plague. Tell me precisely where this object was discovered. In a jar, Cortland said. Standard sealed 10 Italian Label Calamata olives came in with a consignment from Ulia 2 weeks ago. And you opened it? Wolfe asked. I did. I make a habit of quality spot checking. After customs, the seal was unbroken, but one of the olives was split, not visibly. I betentoed it and found this. He gestured to the pit. Biting olives in bulk is not standard procedure. I noted. Cortland gave a tight smile. No, but these are ours, our private libel. I know the product better than I know my wife's handwriting, and this one was off slightly. The skin had a grainy sheen. My tongue caught the cut. Wolfe grunted. So you bit into it, and the pit fell apart? Yes, as cleanly however as someone had hollowed it out, put the paper inside and resealed it. Wolfe turned his head a fraction, which was how he signaled interest. You have the paper. Cortland dredged into his wallet, pulled out a creased square, a toka, and handed it to Wolfe, using the silver tongs from the ashtray, because if it had survived inside an olive, I wasn't going to fingerprint it with ham grease. Wolfe unfolded it carefully. His lips moved as he read. Forgive me, he didn't deserve it. Wasn't an accident. He read it twice, then set it down. You showed this to anyone? No, not yet. He thought it was a prank, but something about it. It felt wrong, not funny. Then itchy to call someone who might know a woman named Marga Thorne. She used to tow work for us in the International Logistics Division. Used to, I asked. Charlotte, the company. 6 months ago, I found out 2 days ago. She's missing. That got me amazing. How cops involved? Unofficially, her sister filed a report. Okay. Marga, she had a complicated personal life. No known address, no consistent. Okay. Jobs police didn't prioritize it. Wolfe scowled. So your theory is that Shepless this message hid it inside an olive and it reached Yahweh accidentally? Yes. And you believe it refers to an actual death? I don't know, but I think she meant for someone to find it. Wolfe pushed back in his chair slightly. Not much, just enough to mark the official opening of his engagement. I too required the names of anyone with direct access to the shipment. Cortland nodded. I made a list. 5 people. Mizu Finklet. The shipment arrived on a Friday. It was held in the Queen's warehouse until Tuesday, then transportito, our bottling facility. I checked the 10. Wednesday morning, I took the list from him. 5 names, all employees of Nova or its affiliates. I read them aloud. Felix Cland, Eva Maruin, Leo Stromnatli, Zick, Ron Boltz. Wolfe's eyes remained closed. Miss Moran, Vice President, Product Oversight. Mr. Strum, Driver. 20 years, Miss Keswick, Facility. Quality Assurance. Very sharp. And Mr. Bolt's night shift warehouse, foreman keeps to himself. I looked up, what about Marga? How'd she connect? To these folks, Cortland hesitated. She had a tension with Eva Maroon. I don't know the details. I got the impression Eva foresaid her out all's lips, curved almost imperceptibly, office dramas. They provide most of the world's tragedies, Courtney looked. Payne Mara was idealistic. She wanted transparency, ethical sourcing, no bribed customs, no gray market shipments, and Miss Moran preferred profits. Wolfe asked. She preferred control. Wolfe opened at his eyes and turned to me. Archie, get the car. I raised an eyebrow. You're leaving the house. Certainly not, you are. He turned back to Cortland. Mr. Goodwin will visit these individuals. He will not accuse, suggest, or expose the message. He will observe, converse, learn Cortland's side up, and if he finds nothing, then I will consider matter concluded. And if he finds something, Wolfe gave a small, feline smile-a-thon. I will be ready. Cortland hesitated. May ask what your fee is. You made $2,000 payable in advance. Cortland swallowed, but didn't link done. Wolfe inclined his head. Fritz will take it. I rose, took the pit and the note, and sealed them into an evidence pouch as I escorted Cland out. I could feel the brownstone recalibrating. We don't often have clients who bring mystery in a mason jar and leave. It's cash like a man paying a debt he hadn't expected to owe as the front door clicked shut. Wolfe called out Archie. Yeah, when you meet Miss Marin, ask her whether she enjoys Olive's. Watch her reaction. Subtle. He shut his eyes. It needn't be. She will betray herself the next morning. I dressed for diplomacy, which in my case means shoes. I can run in, but wouldn't wear to a poker game, and set out to meet the cast of characters who, knowingly or not, had entered. Our latest theater of guilt. Wolfe had provided no script beyond observe and report, but I had the advantage of a face people like to underestimate and a notebook that listens better than most detectives may. First stop was Norvita Imports corporate office, a glass cube over a nest. 51st that looked like it was designed to hide guilt under fluorescent lighting. Inside, the receptionist had the expression of someone who knew every elevator secret but would never share. I asked for Eva Maroon, got a raised eyebrow, and was told she'd be with me shortly. When Eva Marin arrived, she looked exactly like the kind of woman who fired idealists and felt justified doing it late. 40s, sleek as a patent briefcase, and with eyes that said nothing but warmth. She extended a manicured hand and gave me a smile I wouldn't trust with a houseplant. Mr. Goodwin was it. That's right, I'm doing some background. I work for a food packaging audit. Norva's olives are on the list that earned me a slight pounce house. Wasn't used to being surprised, I see. That's quite specific quality. Assurance is the new religion, and no one wants a recall involving Mediterranean fruit shegetured to her office. Let's talk in here. The office was modern, glass-walled with a subtle scent of sandalwood and litigation. I let my eyes wander across the framed awards and the conspicuous lime tea picture frame on the sideboard. No family photos, no clutter, just control. I understand you oversee product integrity, among other things, but yes, Olives Fallender, my domain. I nodded. Have there been any recent complaints, particularly about package? She shook her head slowly. No, we run routine checks. If anything had occurred, I would have been informed. How well did you know Mara Thorne there? A blink. She worked in logistics. Why, she's on our list as a prior employee with supply chain accessor voice. Went a shade cooler. She was passionate, unfortunately, not practical-ish. Took issue with certain vendor relationships. That's not uncommon. But she became disruptive. Disruptive house out. Bursts. Unsubstantiated accusations. Eventually, HR advised she part ways to share his severance and left, angry. I let a moment pass. Do you remember the last thing she said to you? Eva Marin's jaw flexed. Yes. She said, one day you'll open something you thought you controlled. and it'll rot in your hands. I smiled. Colorful, she leaned forward. My Goodwin, if you're suggesting Marga sabotage product packaging. I had advised caution. She had issues. Thanks for your time, I said, standing. If anything unusual comes to mind, give me a call. I'm staying at the Algonquin temporarily. I like a bed. I didn't have to make Sheedan smile at that, which I took as confirmation she liked control, didn't like surprises, and hated that someone might be auditing her without permission. Next up was Leo, Strum the driver. I found him in Norvita's transit dock, wedging crates into a loading van like a man who resented physics. He was mid-50s, thick arms, thinning hair, and a beard that looked like it had been grown out of spite. Strum. I asked, who's asking? He showed him my ID, Archie Goodwin, looking into olive shipments. He laughed, "You some kind of food cop, only for the high-end crimes you hauled the Aliakan segment. Last month probably, we move a lot of olives. Recognize this the my marker." He stopped, face hardening. Yeah, worked logistics, smart kid, bit of a fire starter. How so? She didn't like how things were handled, always sniffing around paperwork, asking why we had 2 invoices for 1 shipment, and nothing. She stopped showing up. I heard she moved to California or something. Wooled. You have known if she came by the warehouse recently? No idea, warehouse gets busy. She wasn't on the schedule, they thanked him and watched him load a crate with a bit more force than necessary. Strum didn't strike me as a killer. He struck me as a man who liked routine and hated paperwork, but he'd been there, and that meant he stayed on the board. My next stop was the facility in Queens, a low-slung brick building that smelled of brine and bureaucracy. I checked in and was led to Natalie Zick, a QA manager. His clipboard, a calm voice, and the permanent squint of someone who'd seen one too many compliance reports. Natalie was in her early 30s, curly hair, pinned up lab coat over jeans. She gave me a polite nod when I introduced myself. KA Audit Shisk. Preliminary, you handled the Apulia batch. She nodded, ran the test, signed off. Quality was high. No mold, no leaks, nothing underweight. Any irregularities are what the containers know if there had been. We'd have flagged it. What about personnel? Anyone unusual on the floor? She hesitated. Well, I remember Ron Boltz being off that week, but he showed up during a night shift, said he was catching up. Boltz, warehouse foreman. Technically yes, but he keeps to himself, works alone. Did Mara ever visit here? No. She really hesitated. I shouldn't say off the record. She came by about 6 weeks ago, asked to see me, she said. Something was coming in that I should watch for a shipment. She didn't say what, and you had told her I'd report any issues. She thanked me. That was it. As I walked out, I mentally circled Natalie's name, not for guilt, but for clarity. She saw more than she said, and hadn't asked for protection. Finally, I tracked down Ron Boltz. He wasn't at the warehouse. I had to find him at a corner diner near Red, hunched in a booth with a plate of eggs and 1,000 wide stare bolts. I slid into the booth before he could say no. I'm looking into a packaging issue on the Aliyah. Olives, you were working nights, Duick. It came through. He didn't look up. I don't talk to auditors. I'm not an auditor. He gave me a glance. You with the cops? Okay. No, just a man with questions. He put his fork down, then asked. I kept it simple. Did Margot Thorne contact your assembly that got a shift? No, but she's contacted you in the past. She asked me for a favor once, wanted to intercept a crate. I said no. Why? Because I don't need that kind of heat. She said something was wrong, that a message was being sent. I told her if she wanted top-leg games, not to do it on my watch. I leaned back, and if someone else did, hish, rugged, then it wasn't my shift. That was as much honesty as I'd get. I left him to his eggs in silence. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was just after 6 o'clock. Wolfe was in the plant room, sipping beer and pretending not to wait for me. Well, he said, as I stepped in, I have 4 suspects and 5 flavors of denial. Moran's playing, Queenstrom's loyal to habit, Natalie's a maybe, and Bolt's is a wall, and Cland holding steady, no cracks yet. Quoth grunted. Then we proceed tomorrow. I shall Nearly, you will return to Miss Sick and tell her this the message was real. We must know whom it was meant for. You think she knows? I think she suspects, and suspicion is the seed of truth. The next morning started like most days that involve Nero Wolfe giving me instructions. I don't entirely like early, precise, and with no chance of negotiation. I'd barely gotten 2 sips into my coffee before he summoned me to the nigger room with a sharp Archie, that's Wolfe's version of a sunrise. He weighs already, seated by buttered eggs before him, looking like a man negotiating peace treaties with his fork. Didn't bother with pleasantries. You will return to Miss Caswick. Tell her you have proof. The massage is genuine. Impress upon her the danger without revealing the full extent of our client's claims. In other words, scared her just enough to talk. I would not describe it so crudely, but yes. He sipped his coffee, then added, after that, investigate Miss Thorne's last known location. We must know who else she might have reached if the message was placid. Deliberately, she may have seeded more than 1 seeds in Olive's poetic practical good day. With that, I was dismissed. I grabbed my coat and headed back to Queen's. Natalie Caswick met me in the facility break room. She looked less tired than the day before, but wore the same weary eyes when I told her the live message was real, that it hadn't just appeared by chance. She sat down slowly, like someone deciding whether to speak or bolt. I thought it might be real, she said finally, but you don't expect Samine to smuggle a confession into produce. Life's full of surprises. I said, oh, you know who it was meant for. She was quiet for a long moment. And it wasn't for me. I'm sure of that, but I think it might have been meant for Eva Maroon. Why, she and Margaret had a confrontation the week Margaret left. It was in the hallway, but people heard it. Margaret accused her of covering up a shipment, something from Naples that didn't go through proper customs. She said, evaporated in the paperwork. In Marin's response, she told Mara if she wanted Tobe a whistleblower, she'd better bring more than her conscience. A week later, Margaret was gone. I jotted that down. You'll think the olive message refers to the Naples shipment. I don't know, but I do know. This Mara was scared the day she came to see me. She said someone had followed her from the warehouse who she wouldn't say. I leaned back in the sick. I didn't want to make this harder than it is, but if Mark is dead or in hiding, we're needy to know who had reason to shut her up. Her voice dropped. There's something else about Baltz. I waited. She and Ron Baltz used to talk quietly. She said he knew where Theppaporg lived, every invoice, every manifest. But then she stopped mentioning him. She ever say, why no? But she looked nervous, like she'd made a mistake. I left her with my card and told her to call if anything else came to mind. Wolfe Woodsy. It was unnecessary, but I find sometimes a little trust goes further than a subpoena. Next I turned my attention to Margaret Thorne. Officially, she'd been last seen 6 weeks ago. Unofficially, she dropped off the radar rentally. No known address, no credit activity, no one reporting her as missing except for a single sister in Westchester who filed a complaint that never went anywhere. Gave Saw Panza a ring and asked him to dig into Argus Digital Trail emails, rentals, anything post-employment. He said he'd call me in a few hours. While waiting, I headed to the last known address listed on Marcus' employment file, a second-floor walk-up in a Tory I thought looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since the Mets won anything. Landlord was a former boxer turned part-time repairman who only spoke in shrugs. She left a few months back, he told me. Didn't say we're paid up, Took her stuff, quiet girl, smart, wrote letters. He pointed to the mailbox. Never email, always pen and paper, said. Some things were better in ink. Anyone come looking for her? He paused, thinking once man. In a suit, short guy, no neck, drove a black SUV. Did he say who he was? No, but he wasn't friendly back at the car. Soul finally rang me. Archie got something hit me. Maga's last known bank activity was in a pawn shop. She sold a laptop, paid in cash. But, more interesting, she checked into a co-working space in the East Village 3 times. Last month, used today past name was still on file. She, using their computers, searched below tough. FDA customs regulation records, and get this, she printed a stack. Of them, what kind of violations? Import irregularities. Most of it dated back to 2 shipments, one from Naples, the other from Bari Gas, whose name shows up on the customs declarations, Eva Maron, nope, Ron Baltz signed as receiving manager. That got me what? About Cortland Clean. Far as I can see, Buthers the twist, a week before she disappeared. Ara, access to secure database from that co-working Spasanor Vita's internal logistics portal. I don't know how she got in. Maybe she didn't log out when she left. Maybe someone gave her credentials that narrowed the field real fast. Ethan Sameen wanted her to find something or set her up to hang herself with it. He thanked Saul and decided it was time for a visit to the last man on our suspect list, Felix. Planned himself. He was staying at a boutique hotel on the Upper West Side. It's kind that offers locally sourced water and emotional support menus. I found him in the lounge sipping coffee like a man who needed bourbon. Mr. Goodwin, he said as he approached. Any progress? Some depends how honest you're feeling today. He stiffened. I've been honest, he said. Margaret was gone. You didn't say she'd been digging into Orva's customs records before she vanished. You didn't say she used the internal portals to do it. He set the cup down. How do you? Doesn't matter what does that someone gave her access. You? He hesitated. Yes, she asked Maverick. When a month before she left Shasade, she suspected something dirty in the Naples batch, asked me to help her trace the paperwork, and you did it out of the kindness of your heart. I did it, 'cause she was right. That was new chefing something. I don't know what, but the next day, she stopped returning my calls, and then you found the olive Hannah did. She was trying to send a message, he said quietly, but I don't think it was meant for me then. Who I think it was meant for Eva Maranwi. He swallowed, because Mara once told me that the only way to hurt Eva was Torwin, her perfect system. I stood Cortland. Said, you're either protecting someone, or you're hiding something. I'm protecting the truth. No, Teef, someone's dead, you're not. I left him staring at his untouched coffee and headed back to the brownstone when Walked Wolfe didn't ask what I'd found. He already knew from the look on my facet that the pot had started to boil. I handed him my notes. He read them silently, then said, Mr. Goodwin, call Sottle him. I want Bolts followed discreetly. We will not move forward until I know whether he is merely a keeper of records or a destroyer of them. The following day began with 12 things. Fritz's Sewell collapsing in protest of a flour shortage, and Saul Panza calling from a payphone on Madison to say that Ron Bolts had made a very curious detour. He left the house at midnight, Saul reported, and drove to a storage unit facility in Brooklyn. Let himself in, came out 20 minutes later with nothing in hand. Buth was sweating like a guy who found termites in his tax returns. Did you see inside? The unit, no, locked up tight, but I got the number. B19, want me to dig up solidly. I hung up, reported to Wolfe, and was sent away with the usual grunt of acknowledgement and a pointed glance toward the hall. Wolfe prefers to digest information in silence. Also, Eggs by Noonsall had the details. The unit belonged to a Shell LLC registered in Delaware, which in New York is a euphemism for someone's hiding something more to thy point. Bolts had rented the unit 2 weeks after Margaret disappeared. The timing made Wolfe grunt again, which for him was like another man leaping to his feet and shouting Eureka. Someone is preserving something, he said, eyes closed, or planning to destroy it. The distinction is crucial. By mid-afternoon, the line between those options got a little blurrier. It started with a cinnamon jar. Fritz found it. He was prepping dinner something Turkish and unnecessarily complicated, and when he reached for the cinnamon from the second rack above the spice drawer, he noticed Sad's cap was off loosened. He assumed it was me. Assumed it was Wolfe, of course. Assumed neither of us would dare touch the sacred rack without a written will, which meant someone had. The brownstone had been disturbed. Wolfe moved fast for him. He summoned me. Fritz Anthem walked with glacial precision to the kitchen, where he examined the rack without touching it. The cap indeed had been slightly turned, less than a full rotation, but enough to mark tampering. Nothing missing, Fritz said. No, Wolfe murmured, but something searched for it. He returned to the office and sat lacing his fingers across his stomach. It's like a man about to wrestle an ethical dilemma. Someone has entered this house, said. Are you sure it wasn't just no? That was the end of the discussion. Turn to me, Archie. Take inventory of every cabinet, files, notes, anything in this house that might have moved a 1/4 inch, and check the locks. So I did. I ran through the library, kitchen, Evan Wolfe's desk drawers. No easy task under his glare, and found no other signs of disturbance. No fingerprints where they shouldn't be. No smudges on polished desert faces. Nothing stolen, just one spice jar slightly twisted. And in this house, this was a crime. We ran down the possibilities. Fritz hadn't left the door open. I hadn't given anyone access. The windows were all locked from inside. That left only 2 options. Either someone had duplicated the key, or someone had been inside the house before and hidden something. I disliked both. Wolfe growled. Next morning, things escalated. We received a manila envelope in the mail. No return address, but postmarked from Brooklyn. Inside was a single photograph, black and white grainy. It showed a woman, slender, dark-haired, caught mid-turn in front of a graffiti-scarred brick wall. It was Margaret, still alive, or at least recently. So, on the back, in neat capital letters, do not look for me. This ends with her. I laid it on Wolfe's desk. He didn't touch it. Well, I said, that's either a warning or an invitation. Both, Wolfe replied, and a lie. How so? She didn't send it. You think she's dead? I think someone wants us to believe she's hiding. B choice. That photograph was staged. A message is meant to be read. This was meant to mislead. We examined the envelope. No fingerprints, cheap stationery. But the watermark on the photo paper was local. Wolfe had me call Saul again. Find out where that photo was printed. Saul had an answer. An hour Latera photo booth on 9th and Avenue B. They still used film stock for the hipsters and tourists with nostalgia disorders. I headed there immediately. The owner, a guy named Renzo, with a beard that had its own zip code, remembered the woman. She came in 3 days ago, he said. Didn't talk, just took one strip, walked out, seemed jittery, alone. Yabat. She looked over her shoulder twice. He had the footage to prove it. Grainy video. It's from a dome camera above the cash register. It showed Mara entering, glancing around, and stepping into the booth. After 30 seconds she came out, pocketed the photos, and left. 5 seconds later, a man walked by the window. Not much of a shot, just a frame of a heavy-set guy in a tan overcoat face. I turned away, but even in low-res footage, I recognized him. Nose Leo Strum. I called Wolfstrom was following her. I said, I suspected as much. Wolfe replied, returned immediately. When I got back, Wolfe had made a rare decision to bring someone back to the house. Not a suspect, not a cop, Natalie's itch. He had Fritz call here and offer clarification on the KA audit. She arrived within the hour, looking confused, but calm. Wolfe greeted her without standing. Miss Keswick, please be seated. Mr. Goodwin tells me you have an honest nature. Let us test it. He slid the photograph across the desk. Her face went pale. She's alive? She asked. No, Wolfe said bluntly. She is at best simply alive. The photograph is staged. Mr. Strum was there, perhaps not as an observer. Natalie didn't speak for a long moment. She told me she was going to try, and last thing she said she wanted to leave something behind in a way Eva Marone couldn't ignore. The Olivesh nodded. She said, if and could get just one pit past them, someone will notice. He thought she was joking. Wolfe leaned forward. Miss Zick, tell me, is it possible Mara had access to the bottling process? No, but she had friends in. Hugh, one a technician, owed her a favor. She could have asked him to slip something in a jar. And who oversaw that technician? A tally. Didn't answer Miss Maroon. She nodded reluctantly. But Kiva wouldn't do this. He's ruthless, yes, but not what. Wolfe's voice was velvet and sharp. Killer. That is what I intend to discover. He turned to me. Archie, bring Mr. Strum. No pretense. I wish to ask him directly what he was doing outside that photo booth, not planning to offer him a brandy first. Wolfe closed his eyes. I have lost patience. He may have entered this house uninvited. I do not abide trespass. Bringing Leorum to the brownstone required two things: a sharp phone calendar. The implication that not showing up might land him in a less comfortable chair, namely, one across from someone with a badge. He arrived 28 minutes, complaining faintly of gasoline and canned espresso, and wearing the expression of a man who'd agreed to a dentist visit. K. Pod suspected they might also extract his spleen. Wolfe didn't greet him. K. He just looked up from his chair, nodded faintly toward the red guest seat, and let the silence build like a dam. Behind his steepled fingers, Strum sank into the chair, uneasy. Called me, he said. I did, Wolfe said. And you came. That is admirable. Let us determine if you will leave in the same condition. That got a blank. Strum looked at me, as if hoping I might be the friendly one in the room. I gave him my best poker face and waited. Wolfe let the silence stretch another beat. Then you followed. Marker to a photo booth on Avenue B. Strum tensed. No, you did. There is footage. Okay, I passed by. I didn't know she'd be there. You're in. A man who passes places aimlessly. Wolfe said coolly. And you are not convincing. Strum's jaw clenched. You lied. Wolfe continued. When you said you hadn't seen Mara recently, you saw her 3 days ago. She entered the booth and you passed by immediately after. Why? Strum shifted. Look, I didn't talk to her. She made it clear she didn't want that, yet you followed her. I was worried. She said she was in trouble. She said someone might try to stop her from talking. Someone like you. His head shot up. No, Jesus, I cared about her. Wolfe studied him and moving, then prove it. Tell me who she feared. Strum hesitated for a moment. He thought he won't, but he exhaled hard and slumped. She was afraid of Mary, but more than that, she was afraid of whoever was protecting Mary. She said someone at Norva was helping cover things. Simeon with access to documents and distribution logs. Wolfe leaned slightly forward. And she told you she planned to leave a message. Strum nodded. She said she had one shot. She didn't say what it was. Did she ask you to help her? Abides, did you? He looked down. No, I told Harriet it was suicide, that she should just walk away. Okay, and now she's missing. Strum said nothing. Wolfe sat back, folding his hands. You may go. Strum blinked. That's it. Forno. Mr. Goodwin will show you out. I escorted him to the door and watched him disappear down 35th Street like a man woad. Walked through a minefield and wasn't entirely sure it was behind him. Back in the office, Wolfe remained newsland for a moment, then said he's frightened. You don't think he's involved? That is not clever enough. Todd, he knows more than he's willing to admit. I nodded. Want me to put Saul back on him? Okay. No, but saw on Marone. That was new. You think she's the pivot? Think she is the reason Marga is missing, and the reason someone entered this house. Saul called an hour later with news I didn't expect. Archie. Eva Marone has been unusually active. She met with someone at the Carl Hotel yesterday's room. Service logs show she dined privately with Ron Bolts. That's an interesting pair. It gets better. Bolts withdrew $15,000 in cash. The next morning, I relayed that to Wolfe HM. He said, hey, payoff, or a buyout, or a blackmail payment. The brownstone felt tighter after that, like the walls were listening. Just after dinner, Fritz called me to the front hall. A package had arrived, no return address. I carried it into the office and set it on Wolfe's desk. He stared at it for a moment, then gestured to open it inside a flash drive. A printed note played this. Then decide if you still want to look. I slotted it into Wolfe's private laptop and loaded the only file on the drive, a video I opened on a warehouse, dark, grainy, time-stamped. 2 weeks ago, the camera wobbled. It had been placed on a shelf, partially hidden. We saw Margaret Thornington from the side door, looking over her shoulder. She was carrying a clipboard. She moved to a pallet of boxed olive jars, opened one, and pulled out a single tin. Then from her coat, she produced a small capsule. She cracked open the tin, removed one olive, and inserted the capsule into it, slipped it back in, resealed it, replaced the tin. Then she turned her face, froze. A figure stepped into the frame, large, heavy set. The resolution was poor, but saw double the way the shoulders curved forward. Ron Bolts. The video ended. Wolfe stared at the screen for a long moment. She was trying to be clever, he said. Finally, she thought. She had time. Someone was watching. He nodded yes, and they were recording her to gain leverage. But someone else got nervous. That footage wasn't meant for us. It was meant for silence, which means, would it mean someone no longer trusts someone else that night? I received a call from Saul. Big development, he said. Warehouse, he learned, was tripped at 3:14 a.m. Police got there 20 minutes later. Nothing stolen, just broken, smashed crates, overturned tins, one guard unconscious. CCTV was erased. I swore. Bolts unknown. Seen leaving the area in a town car 10 minutes before the alarm tripped. Alone, no width. Strum. I hung up and head to Wolfe's room. He was already awake, sipping beer in his robe. Like insomnia was a dignified pastime. I delivered Daniels, Strum, and Marone. He repeated. That complicates things. Why would she involve him? Because she needs someone desperate, and Mr. Strum is precisely that. What now? Wolfe stood slowly, then moved to the office and began making notes. Whiskalite tomorrow. Call all suspects. Moran, Strum, Cortland Bolt, Caswick. We will have our gathering, everyone. Yes, we will end this where it began, in this room under my roof. He turned to face me, eyes hard. Someone entered this house without invitation. They will not leave it without consequence. By the next morning, the brownstone had gone from its usual monastery of order to something closer to a chessboard, one where Nero Wolfe tended to make every move count and leave someone checkmated in their own lies. At precisely 9 o'clock a.m., Wolfe dictated the guest list to me. His voice was calm, almost casual, but each name landed like a closing door. Mr. Phyllis Clant, Miss Eva Marone, Miss Natalie Keswick, Mr. Leoram, Mr. Ron Bolts. Housed. No, police, not yet. Even after the break at the warehouse, he thought incident is leverage, not conclusion. We are not yet ready to deliver, he had me place the calls, which was more fun than you'd think. There's a certain joy instinct to people attempt pilot evasions while realizing Nero Wolfe doesn't offer options, just appointments. Of Marone tried to beg off with a calendar conflict. Told her Wolfe would be deeply disappointed. That worked. Ron Bolts didn't answer his phone, but 5 minutes after I left a message, he called back and agreed to come. His voice sounded tight, like he'd swallowed a gear strum. Didn't argue. Neither did Cortland and sick. Well, she just asked for the time and said she'd be there. I was starting to think Natalie Keswick might be the only one in the mix who'd actually read a mystery novel and knew how this was going to go. By 3 p.m., they had all arrived clustered, awkwardly in the front room like suspects at a surprise birthday party for someone they didn't like. Wolfe kept them waiting standard. Maneuver let the anxiety Steve finally summoned them at 3:30. I ushered them into the office. Wolfe was already in, placed vast and motionless in the yellow leather chair, flanked by an Asmel glass of beer, a legal pad, and an expression that suggested judgment was already underway. Be seated, he said without looking up. 5 chairs had been arranged in a semicircle opposite him. He filled them with varying degrees of stiffness. Cortland looked nervous. Marin looked insulted. Bolts looked sweaty. Strum looked like he hadn't slept. Kazay swigged. Ready. Wolfe opened with a tone that might have been used by a Roman magistrate announcing bad news to a gathering of senators. This is not a court. I offer no formal authority. Both two are here because a woman named Margaret has vanished, and each of you bear some weight in that disappear. Siva bristled. That's a serious accusation. I have not yet accused, Wolfe said flatly, but I will. He turned slightly to Cortland. Mr. Cortland, you brought these case to me because you believed someone had left a message hidden in a jar of olives. You were correct. That message was written by Miss Thorne and inserted deliberately into a shipment handled by Norvair. Involvement ends there unless you wish to confess to more. Cortland swallowed. I don't. Very well. He turned to Bolts. Mr. Bolts, you appeared on video confronting Miss Thorne in a warehouse after hours. She was planting that message. You did not stop her. Why? Bolts flexed. Because she wasn't doing anything illegal. She was breaking and entering. She had access codes, which she no longer should have had. Bolts didn't answer. Wolfe continued. Shortly after you received a private meeting with Miss Morand and withdrew $15. Zero, explain. I was paid for silence, Bolt said, surprising everyone, even me. Morand's head snapped around what he turned to her bitterly. Don't act shocked, you said. I needed to keep my mouth shut about the Naples shipment. You said the company would take care of it if I stayed out of sight. You liar. Wolfe lifted a finger. Silence. Returned Miss Maru. He said, did you authorize a Naples import using falsified customs papers? She hesitated for too long. I did what I had to. She said carefully. We were under pressure to deliver. The product was clean, but not legal. She stiffened. That's irrelevant to you, but not to Marge. Wolfe turned to Strum. Mr. Strum, you followed Thorne to a photo booth. You watched her take what we now know was a decoy image, a staged photograph intended to mislead anyone hunting her. Strum looked away. She didn't tell me it was fake because she didn't trust either. She trusted no one by the end. Strum said nothing. Wolfe looked over them all. Then to Zick. Miss Keswick, you helped me understand what Mara feared, and you were correct. She feared not a single person, but a system. Miss Marin, Mr. Baltson, likely others unknown. They were protecting profits. She was protecting Principal Keswick. Nodded eyes steady. Wolfe paused. There's one final piece. The intrusion into this house that brought a visible shift across the room. Wolfe's tone dropped an octave. Someone entered this residence. They tampered with the spice jar. They searched for something that, alone, regardless of guilt, in the matter of Miss Thorne, is a violation I will not overlook. He turned to Bolts. Chive. The hands of a man who breaks locks, and the need of a man who fears what may be found. Was it? Chipota's lips parted, but before he could speak, Eva, Moran, cute. No, it was me. Everyone turned. Moran stood. Her composure had cracked, not broken, just fissured. I entered the house. I used a key. Her guard had left in her desk years, fair go from when she interned here. She once bragged. She knew someone at the brownstone. She must have copied it. I stiffened. Wolfe just watched her serene. I thought she might have left something here, something to incriminate him. She did, Wolfe said calmly. She left the truth, and truth, Miss Marone, is remarkablest. There was silence, then Wolfe continued. This case is not concluded, Mus. Thorne remains missing, but we now know who silenced her voice, if not her body. He turned to me. Archie called Inspector Kramer, happy to report what exactly Marin, snapped Wolfe. Looked at Hears. If she'd asked whether the Sun would rise to report your conspiracy to falsify shipping records, your payment of fush money, and your unlawful entry into this house, if Miss Thorne is found to die, will also report you as a person of considerable interest. Marin sat back pale. Bolt slumped, strummed, exhaled. Courtly looked like he'd aged 5 years since an hour. Only Natalie Caswick sat still as I stepped out to call Kramer. I looked back once Wolfe had closed his eyes, fingers steepled again, as if mental iridining to the orchids above another game. Played another truth, uncovered Danathor. Trespass, corrected Inspector Kramer. Arrived 2 hours later, wearing the face he used Larissa's for dead bodies and overdue taxes. He didn't wait to be invited. Inkramer doesn't do polite when he smells heat. He stormed through the front door like a man who'd left a stake on Theggerol and found smoke in the sky and made a belly for Wolfe's office. Intercepted him just outside the door. What now? He growled. You call me in the middle of a double homicide buzz to say what that someone moved your paprika cinnamon? I said, and it wasn't moved. It was unscrewed slightly. He stopped, narrowed his eyes. Goodwin, I swear I opened the office door before he could finish and let him in. Wolfe was seated, motionless, hands laced across his middle, like he was cradling a secret, which in fairness he usually was. Inspector, Wolfe said, without rising. Kramer shut the door behind him and marched over to the edge of Wolfe's desk. You'd better have more than a twisted spice jar. I do, Wolfe said. You know have motive, method, and misdirection in the matter of Marga, though. Not, I regretto. Say, a body. Kramer blinked. That slowed him. She's dead. No, Wolfe replied. She's missing. Possibly under coercion. Possibly hiding, but the actions surrounding her disappearance indicate premeditation. He gestured to the armchairs. Please. Will be brief. Kramer sat down reluctantly. I stayed standing, mostly because I enjoyed the view. And Wolfe delivers. Miss Thorne, Wolfe began, believed that her employer, Norvane Ports, was engaged in unlawful import activity, specifically a shipment from Naples, processed under falsified customs declarations. She discovered this treat, raised concern internally, and was subsequently isolated. She continued her investigation on her own. Kramer opened his notebook. How do we know this? Because told, is Natalie sick, and she sought assistance from Mr. Felix Cortland. He granted her access to the company's logistics systems. This gave her enough evidence to plant a message hidden in an olive pit into a shipment. Kramer raised an eyebrow. A message. I passed him the photo of the pit, the note, and the printed message. He read them in silence. She was trying to leave a record. Wolfe said, but someone found out. She was confronted. And Mr. Ron Boltz at Theuer House. The meeting was recorded by someone else, likely Marin, who had Rio Santo. Document leverage. I handed Kramer the flash drive. Wolfe continued. Mr. Boltz received a payment shortly after a bribe to keep quiet. Miss Moran authorized, and when she feared more evidence might exist, she used a spirit key to this house, acquired years prior by Miss Thorne, to enter and search. Kramer looked at me. You let someone break into Wolfe's kitchen? I didn't let anyone do anything, I said. She slipped in while we were out, went through the spice rack. Lucky for us, she's got the subtlety of a freight elevator. Kramer rubbed his forehead. So we've got a shady shipment, a missing girl, a planted message, a payoff, now breaking and entering but no actual proof of a crime. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You have proof of document fraud, smuggling, and criminal trespass, enough to charge Mary, essentially with bolts. Flipping Kramer looked at me again. He flipped. Wolfe flipped him, said, without even standing. Wolfe allowed himself the faintest curve of his lip. Mr. Bolts is a man of appetite. I simply reminded him which side of the table he was seated on. All right, Kramer's side. So Moran's Becky Stone. Yes, Wolfe said. She wanted control. But Marga Thorne represented athlete, not just to her position, but to the entire house of cards. When Marga placed the message, Moran panicked. She tried to suppress, bribe, then misled one that failed. She tried to retrieve whatever might have slipped beyond her reach. She came here, and Strum Kramer asked, an unwitting accomplice. He believed he was helping Marga escape it out. He knew the full extent. Kramer scratched at his jaw. And the girl, Thornshire, may still be alive, Wolfe said. If she is, she will resurface when she believes it is safe to do so. If she isn't, Wolfe leaned back. Then I expect a pre-Cheroux. Now apply, will flush out. Whoever buried her, Kramer nodded slowly. All right, I'll bring in Moran and Bolts. We'll squeeze. I'll have the customs paperwork audited. Good, he stood, but, Wolfe eyes, I don't like being called in after you've arranged the whole Cassini Maxim feel like. A stagehand. Wolfe gave a small, satisfied grunt. Theater is off 10th. A supposed efficient way to reveal truth. It invites everyone to perform and then forgets to cue the curtain. Kramer didn't answer. He just left, muttering about tax fraud and private detectives with god complexes. When the door shut, I turned to Wolfe. You are enjoying this only mildly hissed, closing his eyes. I dislike being intruded upon, so. Moran takes the fall bolt, sings, Strum retreats, and Cortland, he will remain where he belongs, between Cordis and Conscience and Caswick. Wolfe opened one eye. She may yet prove useful. Honest witnesses are rare. We should collect them like stamps. Dinner that night was VE, followed by candied orange peel. Wolfe ate slowly, carefully, when Thella's dish was cleared. He spoke again. Mr. Goodwin, yes. Have you ever noticed that Fortu, when confronted with corruption, tends to whisper? While vice shouts, even honest, a lot of shouting lately. Precisely, the truth was present all along, but it had to be coaxed. I leaned back. In Marga, he closed his eyes again. She placed a confession in an olive pithed. Is not the act of someone who wants to vanish. It is the act of someone who wants to be found. She will return. And if she doesn't, he said nothing for a moment. Then, Justice Mr. Goodwin must make do with what remains. The next morning dawned with no clouds in the sky, and one sitting in the office. Kramer, he returned before lunch. This time, less storm and more siege commander, armed with warrants, a folder, and an expression. Like he'd just bitten into a lemon. He didn't order bolts cracked, he said, dropping the folder on Wolfe's desk. Not all the way, but enough to draw. Straight line from Moran Tooth. Fake manifests. Said she'd been running this scam for over a year. Naplesbury. Cree. Any shipment with high margins and low oversight. Wolfe didn't link, and Miss Thorne. Kramer rubbed his temples. Still no trace. The apartment sent him, and her phone's dead. But you were right. She didn't run. There's a statement in there from a QA tech who work at nights. Said Marga bribed him to slip the olive pit into the Aliyah shipment. He didn't know what was in it. Just that she said someone had to read it. She feared the official channels, Wolfe said, and she was correct. Here's the twist, Kramer continued. The text said he saw her again 4 days after that message was planted. She showed up at the facility in disguise, wig, glasses, the works, just to check. The batch had shipped. She wanted to make sure her massage had legs. I said. Kramer nodded. And after that, nothing. What about Moran? Wolfe asked. In custody, Kramer said. Fighting Shallowired up and tried to blame it all on Bolts. Said she had no knowledge of any message, no idea who broke into your place. Called the whole thing a conspiracy to slander her name. Wolfe grunted. Of course. Kramer leaned forward. But here's what I don't get, Wolfe. If she is the one running this scam, why risk it all over a single jar of olives? Why go digging through your spice rack like he a lunatic? She had lawyers. Money, power. Why panic? Wolfe folded his hands because didn't know what the message said. She didn't know Margaret told anyone Thegentons of the pit, only that it would implicate someone. Marin feared it might be about her, but couldn't be sure. That uncertainty drove her to desperation. She needed to know what Margaret knew. She needed to control. Kramer frowned. So she breaks in, finds nothing, in what hopes the message was ignored. She didn't find nothing. I said, stepping in, she found the cinnamon jar, and she thought that if Margaret had left something else, maybe a copy, maybe a note, it would have been hidden in a place no one else would look. She just guessed wrong. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. She trespassed in a house that does not permit violation. That was her mistake. Kramer shook his head. You want your rules, Wolfe. They are not merely mine, Wolfe said. They are the world's. We just enforce them here with more rigor. He gestured to the folder. What else did Bald say? That Marin used him as a fixer. She'd have him rearrange shipments, falsify entries, even intimidate anyone who got too nosy. He claimed she told him she had taken care of Mara, but that could mean anything. Wolfe nodded. It does not mean murder. Not yet. Kramer stood. Well, keep digging, but I doubt Moran can keep this up in court. You've set the pieces. Now it's up to the DA to play them as. Kramer left. Wolfe turned to me. Archie. Yeah, we are not finished. No, there was one final question. I waited. Why Thatchement? He meant the Aaliyah batch, the one with the olive pit. You think it wasn't random? No, Margaret chose that batch because it went to Cortland. She knew he had inspected personally. She trusted him, not entirely, but enough. She calculated the odds he'd find the message and not report it to Moreau. And I sat down. So this whole game started because she made one bet on one man. Indeed, I thought about that. What now? Wolfe closed his eyes. We didn't wait long. 2 days later, a letter, Eravadna return address, postmarked from Boston. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Merwolf, if you're reading this, you've already guessed. I not dead. I couldn't risk being seen, not until the right person was held accountable. Thank you for noticing, for understanding, for keeping quiet when it mattered. I couldn't trust anyone else. Not even the man I thought might help the olive pit was my last resort. I thought it might get lost in a shipment, but I hoped it. You proved that. Sometimes, hope is enough. I will come for it soon, when it's safe. Tell Archie, I remember. The orchid scent, that his sarcasm needs editing. Margay passed the letter to Wolfe. He read it, once folded it precisely, and placed it in the center. Straw. She lives, has it softly, and so does the truth. The next day Wolfe held caught in the drawing room, with a pork loin so tender it nearly apologized for being eaten. Fritz had outdone himself. No cases, no clients, no inspectors, just silence and spice. As I poured the last of the wine, Wolfe glanced at me. You appear contemplative, Archie. I was just thinking. I said, that girl really jammed a message into a fruit. Most people barely leave a voicemail. She used what she had, Wolfe said, which is what all worthy adversaries do. I nodded. She might have made a decent detective. No, Wolfe said firmly. She is far too moral. There was a long pause, the kind Wolfe reserves for statements he expects to hang in the air. Then he added, morality has no place in deduction, but it gives purpose to the truth. I raised my glass to olives and justice. He raised his slightly to solitude, restored peace, returned to Thabrostone the way a cat returns to its perch, slowly, suspiciously, and ready. Tavenish again at the first sudden movement, Wolfe resumed his schedule with the stubborn gravity of a man who'd done his civic duty and expected the world to respect the boundaries of his home and reader. The orchids, the beer, the books, the meals, each ticked back into rhythm. Fritz refilled the spice rack with a reverence usually reserved for Templiferings, and Wolfe inspected each jar himself. Cinnamon was adalphipited and banished from conversation. Trespass, as far as he was concerned, had been corrected. I, on the other hand, wasn't quite ready. To move Oni kept thinking about Marga, about what it meant to hide a message in something as delicate and ordinary as an olive bell. What it meant to fight corruption with nothing but cleverness and courage. A dental pick, the DA had filed charges against Eva Marone Customs fraud, falsification of corporate records, bribery, and obstruction. Bolts turned states. Nash wasn't much for eloquence, but his memory was clean, and his conscience, it turned out, was for rent at a reasonable Hurley rate. Strum disappeared from the board entirely. Wolfe believed he left the city, believed he finally figured out that being brave and being useful weren't always the same thing. Cortland stayed quiet. He didn't lose his job, but rumor had it he asked for a transfer somewhere, less involved with olives, somewhere he wouldn't be expected to read between the pits. As for Natalie Keswick, she came by us, more uninvited, but not unwelcomed. She brought a tin of anchovies from a new vendor she was vetting, and said she hoped we'd tell her if they were up to standard. Fritz made Canopes Wolfe naughty dance, which for him is the equivalent of throwing a parade. I made a note to keep her number in my back pocket. Not many people passed Wolfe's silent audition for honesty, and then there was Margaret. She'd in return immediately. Wolfe said she wouldn't. She had learned to survive without being seen, and people like that didn't shed caution overnight, but we knew she was watching. We received another note, this time postmarked from Montreal. I'm safe, I'm writing, and someday I'll explain it all for her. Now, let the truth speak for itself. It was signed with an M. Just that, no flourish, no false intimacy, just a mark from someone who had walked through a storm and found her own shelter 1 week. After that note, Wolfe was back in the plant rooms for his usual 4 orchid sessions. He didn't say a word about the case, or about Mara, or even about Kramer, who had shown up the day after the arrest with a half-hearted bottle of scotch and a full-hearted grumble about paperwork. But I could tell Wolfe wasn't quite done, not mentally at least. There was a tension in the way he examined the phalaenopsis hybrids, a tightness in the way he sipped his beer. It broke unavailing just as Fritz served a castle that could have brought tears to a Frenchman's ease. Wolfe put down his fork, wiped his mouth, and looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, sir, do you recall what Marga said in her first message? Word for word. I recited, forgive. He didn't deserve it. It wasn't an accident. Wolfe nodded, a confession, but also a warning. I figured it was about the Naples shipment. He shook his head. Not that was the mistake Moran made, assuming it referred to a product, but Mara was fearing to a person that stopped me cold. She was apologizing, Wolfe said softly, for not stopping what was coming. Didn't deserve it. She wasn't talking about a shipment. She was talking about Sumiand. Who got caught in the machinery? Someone silenced or pushed aside, perhaps just someone with too much curiosity. You'd think someone else died. I think someone disappeared before she did, and Marga carried the guilt. That message was her attempt to keep it from happening again. I sat back, so this was bigger than Marin, most certainly. But Moran fell because she believed the message was about Harrod. That belief revealed her. He returned to his cassoulet calmly, as if he had done. Suggested there was a second victim buried beneath the whole affair. I didn't press it. Wolfe had given me what he wanted to give. Maybe there was another secret. Maybe there wasn't, but, as always, Wolfe had made his move, and now the pieces would sit where he left them. It was 2 weeks later when the flannel thread unwound itself. We received a package small, plain, no note inside, a single olive jar, no label, just a red wax seal on the lid, and one olive inside that pit was split inside. The pit, another slip of paper. This one, typed it, weighs about conscience, not crime. Thank you for listening. I'm going home, MT. Handed Nero Wolfe. He read it once and placed it beside the letter from Montreal, Where'shin for her. I asked Wolfe, didn't answer right away, then finally, anywhere. She is no longer afraid. He reached for his beer. I reached for the remote dinner, came, and went quietly. No interruptions, no phone calls, no spice jars disturbed when I rose to leave the office that night. Wolfe stopped me. Archie. Yeah. He looked at my uva, the rim of his glasses. There's a particular cruelty in crimes that violate order. They do not merely harm the disrupt. They mock the idea that things can be known, can be managed. Yeah, I noticed, but they are also the easiest to expose. I raised an eyebrow. Why? Because the world hungers for symmetry. And when something breaks, that, like a pit, split cleanly down the middle, it begs to be noticed. I nodded slowly. So warrant, solving a crime? No, he said. We were restoring the balance. I left him to his silence, thinking, not for the first time, that Nero Wolfe was many things: a glutton, a tyrant, a genius, and possibly the last philosopher on West 35th.